So it's great to see people joining now. People told me that they will be attending, so I'm keeping an eye on the participant list. Again, thank you all for joining us for this lecture by Dr. Mark Sagar. So I'm just going to wait a few more moments for more people to attend. And before we get started, I want to also let you know how you can ask questions. There's a few different options. You should see below, there's a Q&A button. So you can click on that and type your question in the Q&A. And you can do that while Dr. Sagar is giving his presentation. If you would like to sign your question or you can speak your question, just please hold a moment. Hold those until after the presentation and we'll have a general QA then. If you'd like to sign your question or if you'd like to speak your question out loud, you'll also see at the bottom of the Zoom screen, raise hand, and you can raise hand and then turn your video on and we will see you and spotlight you and you can feel free to communicate your question how you'd like. We just also want to give a moment for the interpreter to be able to see you as well as turn their camera on if they are going to sign into ASL. And I also just put in the chat the link for the captioning. You can look at the captioning in the Zoom itself. You can also click on the link for the transcript. The transcript appears to populate faster than the Zoom captioning. So you can choose which is the better option for yourself. All right then. I think that I have finished with my housekeeping on how to ask questions in Zoom. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kaylin, our Penn graduate student who is going to introduce our esteemed guest and presenter. Thank you. Hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate the privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Mark Sagar. He is now our distinguished lecturer for the Penn Distinguished Lecture Series in our Penn Educational Neuroscience program here at Gallaudet University. This Distinguished Lecture Series is a very important annual event. We acknowledge and honor world-class leaders in cognitive science and educational neuroscience. And this year's theme is from brain development to the development of the virtual brain. Dr. Mark Sagar is the CEO and the co-founder of Soul Machines and the director of the Laboratory for Animate Technologies at the Auckland Bioengineering Institute. He earned a Bachelor of Science and a PhD in engineering from the University of Auckland, and then continued his research training as a postdoctoral researcher at MIT. As part of his career, he has been the special project supervisor at Weta Digital and Sony Pictures Imagework. There, he created the technology animating digital characters in popular blockbuster movies, including Avatar, King Kong, Spider-Man 2, among others. Dr. Sagar is a double Academy Award winner for his groundbreaking work in computer-generated faces. He was also honored with 2 consecutive scientific and engineering Oscars in 2010 and 2011. Dr. Sagar was also awarded a Fellow of the Royal Society in 2019 in honor of his world-leading research. Currently, Dr. Sagar and his colleagues are working on building autonomously animated virtual people with virtual brains and neurological systems. His avatars can engage in highly expressive face-to-face interaction and real-time learning. Dr. Sagar's team brings technology to life. They develop new technologies that realistically embody biologically based models of neural networks and neural systems. It's incredibly impressive. Remarkably, the highly expressive faces create lifelike interactive virtual humans capable of emotional response and real-time learning. His work and his avatars are redefining human interaction with artificial intelligence. This work has the potential to have ramifications ranging from human-machine collaboration in assistive, commercial, educational, and artistic jobs to the future of narrative with autonomous characters. We are especially thrilled to have Dr. Mark Sagar accept our invitation as our Penn Distinguished Lecturer. I'm sure everyone in attendance today is just as curious as I am to hear about his amazing work. Please help me welcome Dr. Mark Sagar as our first Distinguished Lecturer of this year's series. It is indeed our great honor to have you here. Thank you and welcome. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to give this talk. I'm now going to share my screen. So, okay, and let's try this one again. Right, thank you. Yeah, that was. So this talk will be about Baby X, so the overall project and where we're up to with the research for it. So of all the experiences that we have in life, face-to-face interaction fills many of our most meaningful moments. The complex interplay of facial expressions, eye gaze, head movements, and vocalizations in quickly evolving social interaction loops has enormous influence on how a situation will unfold. From birth, these interactions are a fundamental element of learning and lay the foundation for successful social and emotional functioning through life. What gives rise to this most human form of interaction? And is it possible to characterize these early social interactions in sufficient detail to be convincingly reproduced with an interactive virtual model? Can we make a Turing test for early behavior? So the best description of the Baby X project is a large functioning sketch. It's more qualitative than quantitative, but it's really looking at what happens if you put a lot of different pieces together and see the system as a functioning whole. Most research and computation models of infant cognition focus on particular aspects of the cognitive system, but it's important, I think, to consider everything all together in an embodied simulation so that you can actually interact with that. The way that the components interact is complex. Visual attention, for example, interacts with motor control. Episodic memory interacts with emotional responses. Language interfaces with many of these systems. And all of these act together, and our behavior emerges as a result of many of these systems interacting at multiple scales. And that's only one part of the story, because we interact with other people. Most of what we learn comes from other people's brains. So this is an introductory video about Baby X. So I will hit play.
This is Baby X. She's one of the most advanced brain simulations in the world, and she's enjoying playing a peekaboo game with me. So what is Baby X?
It's a virtual infant simulation. It's trying to create the elements which put together aspects of what makes something lifelike.
Baby X isn't an animation. She's a virtual human, and all of the behaviours are generated by neural networks. She watches and listens to what I do and makes her own decisions in real time about how to respond. If I teach her that this is a duck using associative learning, then something amazing happens that we do as well. We just take it completely for granted. Now watch what happens in Baby X's brain when I say the word duck to her. Duck. Her brain builds a link between the word duck and an actual duck. We can see that Baby X is looking at the spider and there's no reaction. But I'm now going to tell her it's something she should be scared of. Scary spider! The spider now provokes a clear fear response. The sight of the spider triggers specific parts of her brain. Her amygdala initiates a cascade of reactions which send chemicals into her system, generating the physical and emotional feelings of fear. When we take the spider away, she calms down. And when we bring it back, we can see she's now scared of it. When Baby X presses the green button, a duck appears. And when she presses the red button, a snake appears. As Baby X continues to press the buttons, her brain begins to form new connections. She wants to see a duck, so she's working out pressing the green button gets her what she wants. This ability to learn sequences and to predict what might be about to happen next is crucial to everything we do. We all know that making eye contact is a powerful way to create a sense of connection. There's a chemical in your brain called oxytocin, the hug drug, which also has an amazing effect on how we connect with other people. I'm going to increase her levels of oxytocin, and let's see what effect that has. Baby X makes a clear shift to focus on eye contact. We're connecting, and she even gives me a smile. Inside Baby X's brain, we can see oxytocin being released. Here it's the greeny blue bits secreted by her pituitary gland. The simple act of connection means she's rewarded with oxytocin, which makes her seek even more connection. And even though I'm interacting with a digital baby, the same thing is happening inside my brain.
So Baby X's brain has many different models which are all combined together and integrated. And so we've been building models of decision making and planning, models of the motor system, models of the somatosensory system, multimodal association, perception, and even imagination. The system is modulated by synthetic neuromodulators. These basically affect the sort of functioning of the rest of the system. So we have virtual dopamine, virtual serotonin, and so forth. And there's the emotional system is a really key part of the behavior, because we believe that emotion and cognition are actually very intertwined. We even are working on a language system to be able to map some of the activities into language to give it a sort of more grounded representation. And critically, there's many different learning systems, so episodic memory, working memory, long-term memory, and so forth. So all of these models that we're building works in progress. We've still got lots and lots of work to do on them. So talking about some of the different parts of the model, the face is the mirror of the brain. And in a way, this was how the project really started. So in previous work, I've been building computer-generated characters and for animation and so forth. But I got really interested in what is the driving force of, what makes people emote, express, behave in all kinds of different ways, and particularly in face-to-face manner, because it gives such a sense of life and consciousness. So if we look at what is the information that's actually transferred between people, and ultimately it's words that are transmitted in body language and also facial expressions. And facial expressions and the body language is converted into muscle activity as a sort of most simple driving force of this complex system. So the face and the body is like a musical instrument. And the simulations effectively compose that music. So for facial muscle activation, the FACS system developed by Paul Ekman is a way of encoding the activity of facial muscles into expressions that we recognize in lots of different contexts. And it gives a sort of a basis for the communication of facial expression. And so one of the things which I was working on was a biomechanical model of facial activity. And so what you're looking at here is a mathematical simulation of the face with all the muscles. And the only thing which is not part of the computational model is the blood vessels. But now we can activate these in a physics simulation to create different types of expressions and create the deformation of the skin and so forth. And now we can combine these in many different ways, because the number of different combinations that are driving the face leads to combinatorial explosion. So you need a system to simulate how these pieces come together. So the thing which really fascinated me is how are these muscles controlled? And so what we've been trying to do in the project is really nerve animation. How do we build the models which drive the signals, which drive the muscles? and put these together in a way that you can interact with. And if we do it in the right way, with the right types of pathways, we should be able to simulate some of the different effects that they have, like, for example, some of the pathologies and so forth. So with the Baby X project, it started off capturing my daughter when she was very young, and we've continued making models for up to about 2 years. She's almost 10 years old now, so we stopped at 2. But in this video here, she's having food for the first time. So she's having a fundamentally new experience, and you can see her eyes widen. Now, these are such profound effects in our lives. What happens if we can see a computational model learn and be surprised by it? It emotionally affects us, and we're invested in the learning of another system. With Baby X, we built the muscular system and then activated these muscles to basically create all of the different facial expressions. And to put the models together, we developed what we call brain language, which is a Lego system for putting together all kinds of different modules, which comprise of neural circuits, biomechanics models, animation models, sensing models. So, you know, we take how the camera is coming in, the microphone, so forth, and drive this into an animation system, which is animating the virtual body. And to put all these things together, it gets very complicated. And so we needed to approach this in a very systematic way in which we could build models, change them, replace them, and so forth, because it's really a work in progress. Nothing is finished. It's all different models where we're testing different things, and we may want to replace different components. Now, to give an example of a, to give an example of a simple model in the system, this is a model of respiratory rhythmogenesis. And so if we take a few different neurons or populations of neurons and look at some of the different circuits which have been published, we can put these together to create a model which then drives the 3D animation. And when this is running in BL, we need a way to visualize these models as well. So what you're seeing here is the visualization in the full 3D model. But if we want to look at where this is in the system in BL, then we put the appropriate circuits that we're building into the places in the neuroanatomy, so that there's a sort of organized way to sort of view how these components come together as a collective whole. So as we're developing the models, we can zoom in on different aspects and we can take a look at their activities. So in this place, we're seeing a sort of activity or firing rate or voltage type trace of various different nuclei which are interacting. And now again, these are qualitative models. So we're really just trying to create the behavior so that it can act as part of an overall system. Now, that's a simpler circuit, but we build lots of different models, and the models don't have to be necessarily built out of neurons. We could have a model which is, for example, when it's processing what the camera is seeing, then in order to make it real time, we have to use some more sort of computational techniques. But the point is we're trying to make it as biologically based as possible. And then combine these systems in a way where the factors which are modulating the interplay can be controlled and visualized, and we can look at the overall balance of these. Now, we also try to approach this in a way where we reflect the architecture of the brain. So, for example, we have a thalamus as a relay station for different, for all the different sort of information flow. We have things like a basal ganglia, which is helping with action selection and so forth. And we have a brainstem model. So a lot of the regulatory functions and different sort of base behaviors are actually in that brainstem. And so on this diagram here, you can see this is on the right, it shows a more complex cognitive architecture. This is from several years ago. So we'll continue to make this, to build this up. But if we sorry, so now to this is how we build the models, but in order to validate them, then we want to be able to compare the result of all these models with real babies. And so with a model with so many parameters, you could do all kinds of things. But what we're trying to do is get a validation where we actually can elicit the same behavior from a caregiver, a parent or an interactor, with the digital model as they would with a real child. And that is how we kind of want to measure effectively what would be a Turing test for this behavior, is can we have the virtual infant elicit the same behaviors out of a real person in a learning scenario. And so to do this, we basically thought we'll create a shared interaction space where we can replace baby X with a real child and then use the same sort of controlled experimental settings. So in this study, we collaborate with Annette Henderson's team at the University of Auckland's Early Learning Laboratory. And so we've been doing a project over the last few years where we've been recording the interaction of real children through effectively a digital shared media, and so that we can compare these interactions. So with these, we look at some fundamental sort of behaviors that we see at developmental milestones between pretty much 1 to 2 years of age. And so we look at a few different developmental sort of tasks, if you like stacking blocks, word learning, so for example, the Blickert or Meadow task. We also look at interactive cooperation. So, we were looking at the synchrony of interaction, and we look at social games, so peekaboo, for example. And then we look at just free play, what's unmotivated, non-goal driven behavior. And so all of these models, what we're trying to do is to get the Baby X model to be able to autonomously do all of these tasks as a model of general behavior. So the types of things that we're looking at to compare are things like the measurable things that we can do in a typical developmental psychology interaction. So we can measure eye gaze, we can measure facial expression, what's going on with the body, speech, or vocalizations, for example. And the key thing that we're really interested in is the origins of cooperation. Like, how do we cooperate so well with other people, and how can we get the same sort of abilities in interacting with the virtual baby? Because once we've built these models, we have a computer model that we can now control. We now can actually, for the first time, we'll be able to have a controlled part of a developmental psychology experiment, because you can't control real babies. So if we have this model running and we're able to get very similar sort of results, then we can start changing things like, eye gaze, facial expressions, different types of behaviors, and really start seeing what the difference is by changing individual variables. Most of the time in developmental psychology, it's really looked at as a dynamic system. There's so many variables changing at all times. And so it would be great to be able to actually just change a few variables at a time and see what those effects are. So this gives an example of the of one of our test setups. So we have a touch screen, and we have two touch screens. So the parent has one, or the parent or caregiver has one touch screen, and the child has another one, but they're interacting on the same game or model. So in this case, on the left, you can see a block stacking task, and on the right, we have a farmyard scene, and this is for sort of just free play and cooperative interaction. Now, here's another example of a different scene, and we do a couple of scenarios. One where we have a system where you can look through a screen, and another where it's a sort of touch screen, so it's not necessarily direct face-to-face. And so we do things like peekaboo and different types of behaviors there, which we want to basically have BabyX simulate. So how we analyze the developmental psychology data is in the standard ways. So we're really looking at time series analysis. So we're looking at how the interactions are going and coding them, and then we'll eventually be coding the interactions with BabyX and the parent/caregiver user in the same way. And so we do speech analysis. So for example, this is from the peekaboo section. So we're specifically looking at changes in the voice, the choice of words, and so forth, and building models so that BabyX can respond in similar ways. So we also do facial expression analysis. So BabyX, as she's watching the user, is tracking the face, and we're looking at the synchrony, the interplay of the parent's facial expressions and the child's facial expressions, and coding these in a way, and then BabyX will regenerate these behaviors. And if we're able to get statistically similar behaviors in similar situations, then that's a way of sort of validating that. Now, as an example for how we put the test different models, I'll give an example of one of the tasks that we're looking at. So this is the Farmyard Task, and in the Farmyard Task, we have a scene where both the caregiver and the child move animals around, and they kind of talk and do different sort of actions, and it's a sort of learning to do things in a turn taking, but it's also they're having to understand what's going on. So they're effectively watching events happening and then causing events. And so as part of our cognitive model, a really critical part of this is how we encode what's going on. So one of the organizing principles that we sort of adhere to is the idea of basically events as a way of compressing experience. And so how do we encode what other people are doing or things that happen into a sequence of events, and then how do we then recreate these types of things using our compressed representation? So if we look at so what we've been building is to work on these as a sort of general event processing model. And so we use the concept of diactic routines. So these are routines that might be moving an object or seeing something happen, seeing a movement happen, but then classifying it into, or who did it, what did it happen to, and what was the action. And so we build sequences of actions to create situations. And then we can have goals, which then, and those goals may be to build a stack of blocks, for example, or it may be to put animals in a particular pattern in a farmyard scene. And so in order to do this, while the baby's watching the interaction, we have a working memory model, which is sort of encoding where things are being placed, what's happening, and so forth. And so here's an example of taken from a study of a real child interacting.
Are you moving the piggy? Good. And now you move the goat. Yeah, what are you going to move now? The duck. Quack, quack. Can Mummy move the cow? And now I'll move the doggy and the ducky. What about the sheep, Andy? Where's the sheep? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, what? Mom. Oh, good girl. This sheep. Yeah. This sheep. Yeah, where's the hay? Yeah. Yeah. Is it not moving? Can Mummy have a turn? Mummy try? Yeah, there you go. Well, one little... Okay, Andy's turn. What are you going to move? Should we move the dog?
So what we're looking at here is one half of the experiment. So the caregiver on the other side is the child is seeing the caregiver through the screen, and lots of things are happening here. There's the synchrony of the interaction, but we're also getting word learning or word teaching happening. So you can hear, in this case, the caregiver trying to teach the names of some of the animals or the sounds that they make. And so with these experiments, we wanted the language people to just interact as normal, and in our computer models, they should be able to learn in the same way. Now, there's a long way to go in terms of recreating this type of behavior in a really realistic way. And so, but we're building step by step, getting closer. So now what I'm going to show you is a model of baby X in the same sort of environment. Now, we are hoping to shortly begin our studies with real parents, but at the moment we've still been working on the models. So with the pandemic, that kind of delayed our plans for our experiments between the real parents and caregivers and baby X, but we're almost there. So at the moment, we're finishing off various components of the model to get it ready to interact. But this is with baby X interacting in the same type of way. So you'll see in this, baby X is observing things, doing things, sort of listening to what I'm saying to her, and then vocalizing. So I'll just play this. Good. I'm going to move this one.
Lamb.
Good.
Cow.
Good girl.
And so in this example, baby X's behaviors all generated autonomously. So it's all a live interaction. So when I speak, she'll be paying attention to me. She can move the objects by her own volition. So she needs to want to move the objects in order to move them. And she can accidentally move things and sort of experience those. Now, when we, with another way of visualizing what's going on in these interactions is to kind of show how these, what we're calling diactic routines, are interacting. So what are the different stages of interaction? So is baby X just observing what's going on? Is she just looking around just to see what's going on in the scene? Is she doing a intransitive action, or is it a transitive action where she's deliberately operating on an object? And so with this model, we've set up a way to sort of visualize how these events are being structured in the cognitive model. So I'll just run this. Now, if you can see up here, so the baby's kind of, this is where she's looking here, and she's just kind of looking around. And now she's observing an event. So she's creating a sort of encoding the fact that this event happened. And as she's going up here, she's looking around again. Now, when she's going into here, she's decided that she wants to do something. And in this case, she's searching for the sheep. Now she's moving the sheep, and she wanted to move it from here to here, and she's gone into a different state, looking around, and now she's back to observing another event again. And so these are all different elements of basically event perception and then action, but put in a way in which we can kind of understand them and map them to language. So part of this is the way that we can say that I am looking at something, I am moving a sheep from here to here. You are looking at something, you are moving a sheep from here to here. And so these are ways in which the sensory motor interaction starts forming the basis for a grounded language model. Now here's the same sort of thing again, but showing the BL visualizer. And this is in a block stacking one, and it's showing that you can visualize other components of the system. So for example, here we're showing a few elements of the visual system as she's, so you'll see things like the edge detection, color movement, this type of thing as she's moving objects in the fuller model. Okay. And so with this work, there's been a lot of people that have worked on different elements. And this is just one part of our study. We're doing lots and lots of different aspects. And so, but we've over the years, several people have contributed to this, and I'll just list a few of them here, and like to thank the support that we've had from the University of Auckland, the Li Ka-shing Foundation, the MBIE, and so forth. And it's a really ongoing work in progress, but we, but it's exciting because every step that we take allows us to do lots more. And I'll sort of end the talk there, and so thank you very much, and take some questions.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It's very fascinating. I see here that we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. And there's been some discussion in the chat as well. So maybe we can go ahead and ask you to please go ahead and stop sharing your screen, and we'll see if anyone would like to pop up on screen to ask their question. Let's see here. So I see a bunch of different people who have typed some questions in the Q&A. Is there anyone who would like to pop up on screen to ask their question, or would you prefer me to read your question? All right, Melissa, if you would like to go ahead and pop up on screen.
Hi, that's fine. Hi, great. Wow, your presentation is truly mind-blowing. I had read about your work previously, and I have to just really ask, I mean, obviously, so Baby X is based on AI. And is it really autonomous with the neural network, or does the team have to do some sort of manual manipulations? I mean, how much is truly autonomous and how much is it controlled by the team? With your talk, I was just impressed. It looked like 100% was autonomous. I really have to ask for more specifics, and I know everyone is wondering the same thing, but it's truly amazing.
Autonomous behavior is one of the main goals of the project, because at a sort of deeper level, we're really interested in, what is free will, what motivates any type of behavior whatsoever. So, for example, we will engage in play behavior where it's not goal-driven. We will have goal-driven behavior. We'll have behavior which is driven by homeostatic needs. And so at the very core of what we're trying to do is build a model of autonomy that is flexible as well, that reacts to different situations in different contexts. So, and this is why we've been doing the study with the various elements, because if you're playing peekaboo, it's a very different context to stacking blocks. So how is it that people are able to so flexibly go from one state to the other? And this is one of the key questions that we're trying to answer. So in the BabyX models that you're watching, you're seeing these different types of behavioral systems or modes competing with each other. So, for example, if I, as the interactor, start moving blocks around, I capture the attention of the BabyX model, and now BabyX is entering into sort of an observatory state. But when I stop doing things, BabyX gets bored or may have a driver. So with the behavioral models that we use, we look at all kinds of different ideas to do with autonomous behavior. So for example, we have concepts of reducing error. So for example, how do I reduce the surprise of what's going on? So you can have, so basically reducing error prediction as a driver. You've got mastery of behaviors, what gives reward. So with BabyX, you've got things like the dopamine system, which is effectively, not only is it a learning parameter, but it's also a motivational parameter. And then we have the interaction with the user. And so one of the sort of questions that we're trying to work is, what is this fundamental basis for cooperation? So to answer the question about how much is truly autonomous, we are still sort of looking at all the different factors which are driving this. So, and seeing which factors affect things, but that's part of really the overall work. So So with the study, when baby X's, when we do the proper study with the parents, it will be fully autonomous so that all of those tasks will just happen. There'll be no setup with that. So at the moment, we're still working on different aspects of the model. So we're still working on aspects of the language models, for example, the goal-driven behaviors and things like that. So we can sort of we can turn on and off different things to test these systems, but the whole goal is to do this completely autonomously.
I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's truly incredible. Thank you for that detailed explanation. It's truly amazing. I do have a follow-up question, but I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation. I am thinking about the visual detection and all data sets, but I just have a lot of questions. I hope that we can have a follow-up question. I'm working on the team with the Brain Language Lab as well as the Motion Light Lab, and we're also working on virtual humans and with young deaf babies. But the autonomous element is truly challenging and it's really next level. So we still have a considerable amount of human manipulation behind those those virtual models. But thank you so much for that detailed explanation. I really appreciate it. I know you're going to move on to other questions.
Yes, there's so each part of the model there is if you think about all the different systems interacting. So we only showed a small part of the visual model, but we try to model the different factors which drive attention. And so, for example, you've got everything from movement, color, luminous, object recognition, salience, all these different things which are actually contributing to what grabs our visual attention. But then we've also got top-down driving of the eye. So if you're deliberately looking for something, or and then that determines what's being seen, what's being foveated. We also have a sort of peripheral vision where we're looking at everything that the camera sees. Now, in terms of a real child, what we're doing on the computer is radically simplified. For example, we've got a fixed camera, so we have to it's already in our real eyes are moving around, looking all over the place, and so our brains have got a lot more to do. And because we're interacting in effectively this virtual area with a 2D screen, this simplifies some of the processing problems. But we're attempting to make this as sort of biologically plausible as we can within the constraints of having to run it in real time. So the models that we use, there's a combination of multiple different models, and these interact together to create sort of emergent behavior, and that's what gives the autonomy of the model. Is you never really know exactly what's going to happen.
Okay, can you hear me? I have a question for you, Dr. Sagar. That was a truly astounding presentation, and I echo what Melissa said before. I know we all have a lot of questions. I have a question for you more related to what you were talking about with animation and creating the appearance of the virtual characters. Of course, I think you're right about the power of facial expression to bring meaning to interactions. I'm curious, do you think that having the neural model controlling the facial expressions is a better way to create authentic facial expressions? Or can we get the same outcomes for a virtual character, the same expressiveness that feels natural using traditional animation techniques that aren't, you know, drawing on these neural models? So yeah, I think that's my question. Are the neural models really advancing the animation themselves?
So that's a great question. So it comes down to combinatorial explosion. If you have a animation of a model, so here's me smiling, for example, but now I want to smile and frown at the same time. And now I'm combining two different things, but now I'm looking at something, but now I'm speaking. We have to combine all of these different elements. So all the time, our face is driven by multiple inputs, and these are simultaneous. We may be feeling tired, so our eyelids are slow. We may be slouching. All of these different elements combine in almost an infinite variety of combinations. And so if you use traditional animation on these, you have to create all the alphabet of what can happen in order to form all these words. So then with the animation, to feel truly connected to it, I believe, is the behavior has to be meaningful. It has to be motivated by something appropriate. For example, if the digital baby looks at something, then you should have a model of attention, which is driving where the baby's looking, rather than it just being animated, because that model of attention is now going to influence the subsequent behavior. So if something moves and the baby looks at it, then the next thing that the baby does will be based on maybe what the baby sees there. And so this is where all the neural models, which are really, you know, affecting all the different degrees of freedom of the face, I think really add up. It's to try to make the animation meaningful rather than just an animation. So it's like, what is the cause of all these behaviors? Because when we watch an animation, we are effectively projecting our own model of what we think is happening. So we are forming, in our minds, we are forming an attentional model of what we think the other person is doing. And so in this case, we actually want, so baby X to have a full attentional model, to have a full motivation, so that the behaviors are all consistent. So for example, if baby X gets upset or stressed, then she's not going to instantly become happy, because the emotional system has to calm down. And so I think the realism comes from having models of all these systems interacting, and the way that they interact, I think, requires a more complex model than a traditional animation.
Okay, thank you. That was really interesting to think about, and I have, like Melissa, more follow-up questions, but I will cede my spot to Dr. Bertoletti or another question. Thank you.
So I would like, so you have an open invitation to come and visit our campus. And at some point when COVID subsides, we'd love to have you come and see our labs. And the invitation is always open. So we actually have a few more questions here. And we do have some more time. So we have Lauren Dodson. I think that.
I would like to voice my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead, Lauren.
I am a Penn student and we have studied some of your work in our class. Thank you very much for being here. I'm particularly interested in your work and how you might apply it to American Sign Language. And one of the things that I'm particularly curious about is American Sign Language in particular is a visual spatial language which relies much more which relies much more than hand movements through space. It also incorporates non-manual markers, facial expressions, movements to convey emotion and intensity, as well as our grammatical structure. I'm particularly fascinated by how different and more realistic that your animations look than other avatars that I've seen on YouTube and video games, for example. So how do you think the human-like appearance of your avatars and the digital brain could be applied to ASL and other sign languages of the world? But I'm also interested in not only the appearance of it and the facial structure and the realism, but also sort of the intuitiveness that you're talking about and the, I guess, autonomous nature of the language interaction.
So actually, I can probably show a video of that to show where. So apart from making the baby model, we are also making virtual assistant models that can use their hands to gesture and so forth. So I'll just I'll share the screen again. So this is an example of our share. So this is an example of a digital model. So as we sort of scrub through here, you'll see that she will be sort of gesturing and there'll be a scene here where she so now these behaviors are driven by word input, but she'll also be gesturing to let's see if I jump through here. So for example, you know, paying attention to different things, moving. So as you see, it's facial expressions as well as you know, effectively you know, hand movements and so forth. And so I think that for things like sign language, where facial expression and body movement all come together, I think that these things are, you know, quite you know, this could be good for that. So so you know, so particular, you know, so we're actually working on so I'll just pause this video. So we're actually working on models of language to gesture at the moment. Now these models are not using the autonomous aspect of the brain model, because we're taking arbitrary language, but then we're doing sentiment analysis on those using more standard machine learning techniques and language analysis models, and then we're converting those to effectively the appropriate gestures. So if she's talking about me, then she'll do this, or if it's you, and so forth. And these are, and we're doing this to basically enhance communication, enhance sort of language expression, so she can emphasize particular words which may be novel, for example, or you can actually control what words that you actually want the digital human to emphasize.
Thank you very much for your time. I find your work fascinating.
So we already have elements of what's in ASL, and ASL is more than just gesture. And that will require some more complex analysis of movement. And it seems that you already have part of that already established in your systems. That's very nice to see. And really, you definitely have to come and visit us and see our lab. And we have so many different projects here that I think would really complement the kind of work that you're already engaged with. We do have some more questions here. I would like to, I'll read them out loud myself. We have one from MJ Kilbus. Oh, so I think the interpreter is going to need me. I'm going to need the interpreter to help sign this, because I think this is beyond my ASL skills at this point to interpret this question and to sign.
Okay, so does the lack of physical features of taste, heat, vibration, or texture have an effect on the AI baby? I know that babies start to learn about the varying textures of each object by placing them in their mouth, hands, and whatnot. Does this mean that the AI baby will never be 100% developed as baby brain would be?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So, if we think about our most primal sense is really our olfactory sense, taste and smell. That's the thing which is the most critical thing. Now, we can do virtual taste and smell, but it's, of course, there's no easy way to, without a computer sensor that can do that. I do believe in the future we will have olfactory sensors on the computer, just like we have a microphone. So at that point we could add it in. Now, touch is another absolutely fundamental sense. So in a way, olfaction and the sense of touch are more important than anything else in terms of our sort of evolutionary biology. So we do have a very simplified touch in that we've got the, when baby X touches a virtual object, we can simulate the mechanoreceptors sort of reacting to that object. And we also have the touch screen. So if you touch the screen and it touches, say, baby X's body, then that can be like a caressing touch, for example. So the way in which that touch acts. So on a real person, if you touch like quickly, it creates a sort of annoying sensation, but it could be a caress, a slow one. And these are so important in terms of caregiving. And so with baby X, I didn't show this, but if baby X gets upset, then one of the ways that you can console her is by calming her down through touching the screen.
Nice. It's very interesting. Now I think that we had another person in line. It's Dr. Petitto. Can we give Dr. Petitto the possibility of either asking or signing the question? Sorry, there's trying to.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm so impressed and so grateful for you to come today. Very excited about your work and very thought-provoking. I am the PI on the team that attempted to build a robot avatar to teach signing to young deaf babies, and working with Melissa Malscoon and Jason Lamberton. We did build earlier attempts at the signing avatars. So I know what I'm impressed with is I really know the challenges that come together for baby X. And what I find interesting in baby X also is your implicit theory of learning. I really love the way in which you decomposed the aspects, deconstructed the aspects of learning, and tried to see how these multiple components interact to come together to give emergent learning, emergent knowledge. My question is really at that level. While aspects of knowledge and aspects of knowledge of the world are built up that way, there literally are constraints in early learning whereby the child could have entertained certain pairings in the environment, but never take it. And one of the most profound examples of this is in early language learning, early word learning. A young child sees a caretaker taking a pitcher out of the refrigerator, takes a glass, pours the liquid in the glass. The 11-month-old precocious baby could have made a potential infinite number of pairings between that word and the reference of the environment, and they never take that infinity. Children think the word refers to the object, not the event or the verb or the action. So we know there are constraints in learning. How have you accommodated the human constraints in learning, the predispositions and the biases that we're born with. I'm just curious, how do you deal with that? Because all of knowledge does not come from the environmental input.
That's so one of the fantastic question, and yes, I think it's an incredibly interesting question, which we're trying to build simple models of. So one of the things that we do in the language thing is a sort of cross-situational learning, where we have lots of words come in, and then we have almost like a Hebbian learning of the most sort of I guess statistically likely words which pair with an object which is currently being attended to. And this is where there's joint attention models can come in, or in terms of the language learning task, what we're actually looking at is the way that the caregivers teach language. So for example, you will look at an object or you will move an object and then label it. And so you're actually helping those systems, because first of all, you're getting the attention of the child, and then you're labeling the object, and you're effectively directing the attention to do that. So I think as parents or caregivers, a huge amount of this is scaffolding, is how do we watch what the baby's doing, and we control how we teach. We're choosing our moment to say words, for example. Now, there's other things that if the parent's not doing that, and then you're just watching things happen, as you say, we automatically segment objects. You know, we've got a way that we'll realize that something's an object. It's actually a solid thing, which is you know, being manipulated, and so how is that object broken down? How do we compress that information? So one of the things that we're doing with the event model is we're looking at when something is moving and it's attended to, then we start doing an object sort of classification on that. And then if there's language coming in at that same time, then you're basically reducing the sort of infinite number of combinations down to a few cases. And so we don't really know the answer to the question that you asked, but that's how we're trying to approach it. So we're trying to do it for very simple things at the moment. But the idea is that eventually there should be sort of some statistical regularities between basically all the words which are coming in, the frequency of them associated with what the model is classifying. Like, is it seeing an action? Is it seeing an object? Specifically, you know, it may be a face-to-face thing, so it may be me and you, for example. And so these clusterings of these pairings are what we're hoping to build up. But, you know, there's still lots of work to do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that the audience has typed in and asked me to read for you. To make sure I'm not distorting their questions, translating to ASL, I'm letting the interpreters do that. So from Jason, one of our experts in the Motion and Light Lab, his question is, I think the Baby X looks great in regards to Uncanny Valley. Since we do sign language animation, that was a big issue for us to get it to look just right. And I'm curious, what was your approach to this regard, the reactions of real humans to the look of the virtual baby?
So we haven't started the official test with the real caregivers and Baby X yet, but that will be one of the things that we look at. What we have anecdotally is that I guess we see that people interact with Baby X in a sort of human-like way, because what I think happens is that when you realize that everything that you do actually affects the behavior of the baby model, you get more sort of bought in. But we don't really know. These are some of the things that we can experiment with. So, you know, we're one of the reasons that we created effectively a digital screen, so that we got real parents to interact with their own children through a screen rather than directly, to sort of see, because then we could have this sort of area where we could actually, you know, swap out the real baby. We actually did another study called BCOM, which Annette Henderson's team did as well, where we actually got parents to interact with other people's children's, as we did a baby swap. So they would take their own child, and we recorded them interacting with their own child, and then we swapped the child for somebody else's child to then see how they interacted with the child that they weren't familiar with. And we recorded all of that information as well, because our thesis was that when they interact with baby X, it will be like interacting with somebody else's child, if assuming baby X is working well enough.
Right, that makes sense. We have another question, but I wanted to ask so many questions. This one is kind of related to what you just mentioned. So sorry, Athena, I will ask your question just after. This raises the huge question that we're currently experiencing in our world, the ethical part of it. You said that you want to make it very engaging so that people interact with the baby as if it was a real baby, a real human. We do that very easily with animals because, as you said, they respond to us. We've read that one of your interviews that you put a lot of care in this and you're considering this. What are some of the measures that you're considering about this ethical issue? And we know that the world is not made only of nice people with good intentions. Is there a way to protect from abusing of this feature that you're just creating that might be so good to help, as you said, isolated individuals not feel so alone, or helping, sick people that cannot see their families because of COVID, or these kind of situations? How do you navigate? How do you work with this big ethical question?
We've actually discussed this in detail. We have a paper, this is with Alistair Knott and Martin Takak, who are key contributors to the project, but we've written a paper called The Ethics of Baby X. And so it goes into a lot of these questions. I think it's available online now, and I think it's in the AI and Ethics journal. But we consider the question from multiple angles. So we think about not only, so we think about what are potentially adverse effects on a user, because you wouldn't want somebody to become attached, so for example. And then in another case, you don't want to encourage bad behavior. So for example, if somebody can tease or be mean to the baby, these are types of things where you don't want to encourage that type of behavior. But we also consider another position where what happens if in the future the models become sufficiently complex that we can actually classify them as a moral patient, which means that the digital, at some point in the future, the digital feelings of that model actually may have some effect. Now, this seems ridiculous, but why I think it's not necessarily is because when you're interacting with a digital model, the behavior of that digital model then affects your subsequent behavior. So it can have an effect on the real world because you're creating a loop. And so if the digital model is feeling in a particular way, and now we're talking numbers here, we're not talking real feelings, but we're going, if we look at the sort of, I guess these numbers are acting in a way which is similar to how maybe our own emotional levels are changing, then that can actually have an effect on us interacting. And so it's a very complex system. So we think it's a very important system, especially as we go into the future. And this is one of our approaches to artificial intelligence as well, is that how do we humanize it? How do we make it something that people can interact in a more human-like way and socialize in a way? Because are we making a future where everything's controlled by black boxes, or do we want to be part of the loop? So we really believe that we want people to be a huge part of that loop, just like we are in societies. The way that we socially interact is is so critical, but that's what regulates us. You know, that's how humans cooperate, is because we you know, if you do something in society, you can't just do anything, because you'll be ostracized. You know, society self-regulates. And so with all these systems, it's like, how do we build in these regulations? Because I think they're critical.
Thank you. We'll look for the paper. I'm sure it's going to be a great addition. I'm sorry, I skipped a question. Now I feel bad. I've skipped a question. I will ask it because I've received a reminder. And then Athena, I promise I'll get to your question. So is the AI perceiving stimuli solely through the eyes, like first person versus third person view? This is the question.
It's first person. So for the basically we're trying to do everything first person, so that what baby X is looking at is where she's attending, what she's hearing is coming through the microphone, what she's feeling is what she's touching. So we're trying to do everything first person as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then Athena's question, she's also a student in our PEN program. Does baby X become tired and fatigued, or is it built as an ideal baby that never gets tantrums and never gets tired? And does it sleep and dream? For example, would she dream about what she actually learned, like the sheep or other events?
That's exactly what we're building. Yes. So baby X. So we believe that sleep is a critical part of memory consolidation. So that when and it's been shown that sleep deprivation causes memory loss and so forth. So we believe that the babies are actually when they go to sleep or when they cry or they fuss, they're overwhelmed. They've taken in too much information. So we think that this is a critical part of the cycle of teaching. And as caregivers, it's like we choose, we look, is this an appropriate teaching moment? Or should I step back and let the baby relax? So in our memory models, we've got both real-time learning, so the online learning. This is like the working memory working, where you're actually learning things on the fly. But then when we sleep, we consolidate those memories, and then we form more compressed representations. Now, we do have models of dreaming, and what the models of dreaming do is they replay these memories, and so that then part of the replay is part of a consolidation model. We also have, when the baby's deciding what to do, there's noise in the system as well, and so there can be sort of this is part of the autonomy of the model, is that there's a replay of things which have just been sort of witnessed, for example, and or particular goals or different types of things. These can all be acted, and then we have a visual imagination for the model as well, where the digital baby is recreating a sort of compressed visual representation of what's being thought about. And so we're very interested in effectively dreaming and imagination, because one of the other things which we've been working on is on acts of creation, like making acts. So we've got another example. We've got baby X doing drawings, and these are constructive drawings where baby X is learning through a mirror neuron system, and then sort of creating by taking some of these sort of things that baby X has seen, and then rebuilding them, or potentially trying something new. But I think that this whole thing is a key part of learning, because play is so important. And so we need to have exploration, we need to have action discovery as part of these models. So for example, motor babbling, babies will be just moving around randomly, but they hit their hand against something and suddenly they realize, oh, there's an object here. And so this exploration of interaction is a key part of that learning. Now, there's one other key part of the baby's emotional state and fussiness. So I think that the emotional states are really responding to the way in which information is coming. So a baby can get actually, and Baby X's emotional model, it's not what it is, it's how it's coming at the thing. So for example, you can show a toy, and one time the toy will make the baby happy, but another time it might make the baby cry. So the same stimuli is creating different emotions, but it might be because the baby's overwhelmed at that moment. There's information overload. So Baby X's emotional model works on really how information is coming and what the current state is, rather than what it is. Because I think emotion is a general way in which we coordinate basically the readiness of our bodies and mind in order to learn. So if things come quickly, we get a shock because we don't know what it is. And so our core behavioral systems, and this is, you know, across the, you know, mammals, for example, are reacting in a way where the body is getting into a state. So the emotions are doing a brain-body coordination, which is the most appropriate behavior for the situation in order to best process it. So if something's happening slowly, that's a point where you can learn from it because you're not, you know, wanting to run away or so forth. So there's all kinds of these things which I think are key factors of learning.
One that is truly amazing how many details you've put into not only from the design to the models to the thinking. It's truly inspiring, and I think we really want you on campus even more now. We definitely were excited to have you now, but there would be so much. I think unfortunately we're really running close to the end time. Our interpreters have their time reaching their end, and you had to do a very early wake up today to be with us from New Zealand. So thank you so much. I hope we will have opportunities to ask you more questions and show you what's happening in our program. I think
I would love to come and visit.
Wonderful. We're excited. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the participants that joined today. And I will be in touch by email if anything, and feel free to reach out to us. I might share your email address to a few people that have already asked for them to like maybe directly send a few more questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, interpreters, also for your amazing work today.
Thank you very much, and I know that you first contacted me a few years ago, and I wasn't able to make it, and then since the pandemic, then you know I haven't really left New Zealand actually for the last couple of years. So
right, your country's completely closed, right?
Yeah. So wow. You can leave. It's just you can't get back in. So
yes, no. Well, hopefully one day things will be better. And if you don't come over, we'll try to come over.
Absolutely, yeah, and so my collaborators, I think, they'd be really interested in visiting as well. So it's
of course. Feel free to share my email if they want to get in touch with me or any of my colleagues. We're here, and you know we're also stuck here, so
yeah,
to have anyone. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Friday and weekend.
Thank you. Very nice to talk to you. Okay,
nice meeting you. Bye-bye.